Jim.
Joining me now to discuss former U.S. Ambassador at Large for war crimes issues, Clint Williamson. He's now a senior fellow at the McCain Institute for International Leadership. Ambassador, it's good to have you on this morning. First,
my pleasure. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you about the whole picture here. The ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, described Ukraine as a crime scene. Based on what you've seen so far, and I know there's a lot of evidence that needs to be gathered, eyewitness testimony, but based on what you've seen so far, do you see hard evidence of war crimes, and if so, how broadly in Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from almost the earliest days of the current invasion, we were seeing pretty clear indications of war crimes. And these are specific violations of the Geneva Convention designed to protect non-combatants, either civilians or soldiers no longer able to defend them. Since then, in places like Bucha, Irpin, and Mariupol, I think there's pretty compelling evidence of crimes against humanity. And I would agree with Karim Khan's statement. I mean, certainly these areas on the outskirts of Kyiv constitute one continuous large crime scene.
I mean, we've been showing pictures there as you've been speaking of yet one more civilian family mourning over the body of yet one more civilian victim here, and they appear to be the deliberate targets. In fact, there's a lot of evidence of that of Russian attacks. Are the more likely legal targets here, the ones that will end up in the dock at some point, is it more likely for them to be field commanders? I mean, for instance, there are many Russian commanders already in Ukrainian custody, prisoners of war, rather than someone higher up the chain, Vladimir Putin himself?
Well, I think the International Criminal Court certainly seems intent on conducting an investigation here, and I applaud that. And they're taking steps in that direction. But people need to keep in mind that they have limited capabilities here in terms of how many cases they can take. They have a global jurisdiction. They're dealing with a number of situations around the world right now. And in any case, they've never done more than 5 or 6 indictments. So they may well target senior political and military leaders in Moscow. And this could potentially go up to President Putin himself. But anyone that falls below the threshold level of ICC prosecutions will probably have to be dealt with in other ways. And right now, that looks like that would take place through Ukrainian national authorities investigating and potentially prosecuting those crimes.
Yeah, well, if you look back to the Yugoslav war in the beginning, it might have seemed a long shot for someone like Slobodan Milosevic to face legal reckoning, but in the end, he did. So perhaps could happen here as well. I do want to ask you, before we go, there are a number of forms that this prosecution could take, largely outside the country, ICC, something along those lines, largely inside the country. But it's your view that this should be done hand in hand. Ukrainian authorities with the help of, or under the auspices of, say, the International Criminal Court?
Well, the International Criminal Court operates on a concept of what's called complementarity. So it is really seen as a court of last resort. But certainly in a conflict of this scale, on crimes on this scale, this is really should be the bailiwick of the court. And I think they may be in a position to do these high-level prosecutions. But as I said, there's just limits to how many cases they can actually undertake. And so this is the way the court was designed, to work hand in hand with national authorities. And here we have a situation unlike Syria or Myanmar, for example, where national authorities were actually hostile to accountability efforts because they were complicit in crimes. Here we have a democratically elected government that has legal authorities to investigate and prosecute these cases. And so I think all of us in the international community are very interested in supporting them in doing that.
It's a good point. Functioning government there, let them take the lead. Ambassador Clint Williamson, thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you.